Hey everybody, Mayor Cam Guthrie here from the city of Guelph, and I am here with another online connection. It's Alkarim Delvani.
Yeah,
Uh, Welcome, and thank you very, very much for wanting to even chat with me. I really, really appreciate that.
yeah, no, thank you for inviting me to connect. Obviously, I've been following your story and all the good work you're doing in Guelph, and obviously, I know Ontario is going through a ton of transformations. So excited to be here, just talking about housing.
Well, look, right back at you. I've been following you as well, and inspired, to be honest with you, just about what you are doing. And I thought this needs to be shared even further than just in a little bit here and there online. And I thought, you know, if I could talk to you and ask you a bunch of questions, maybe other people can be inspired and as I have been. So I do really appreciate this time. And let's start with the normal stuff. Who the heck are you? Where are you from? What do you do?
Yeah, no, thank you so much for your kind comments. Obviously, that means a lot, and yeah, it's been awesome connecting with people and furthering the idea of how we get a certain type of housing typology and how we start to meet this crisis. I think that's the one thing that's not unique is many cities across North America are facing these challenges of development, and so I know a lot of folks feel like their situation is different than others. It's like there's this overlying macro theme that seems to be happening across all of our cities, whether you're in a primary market or secondary market. And so the one hope I do have is for secondary markets that maybe haven't seen as much pressure or as much development can get it right. And so um, I'm more bullish on secondary markets, believe it or not, because I just think they don't have as many as the complexities and nuances entrenched. And so, yeah, this is super cool for me. But yeah, back to me. I'm a born and raised Calgarian. My parents migrated to Canada as refugees in the 70s from East Africa during the time kind of of Idi Amin. Neither of them had spoke English, didn't have high school education, and kind of came over. And it's the gift of this country, which I feel incredibly indebted to because it allowed my family to come and find housing and allowed my parents to kind of settle and give us the opportunity that we have. And so I'm 100% through and through Canadian, and anything I can do to help this country is super important for me. So yeah, like I said, born and raised here. I've been in the real estate industry now for over 15 years. I started kind of building single family houses and suburban kind of estate homes, helping my brother. When I graduated from the university from the business school, I asked him about potentially coming back and doing stuff within the established neighborhoods. I was a realtor for right out of high school. I went and got my license. I just wanted to learn about the market. And so before I went to university, yeah, I got my real estate license. And at the time, there wasn't a ton of regulations. Like there wasn't a ton of requirements. You just had to be able to pass certain exams. And so
Yes,
I
yes.
did that. I never sold a house throughout my most of my real estate career. I just sat open houses, and most realtors hated sitting open houses. And
Yeah.
so I got paid to sit open houses, which wasn't really kosher, but like they all paid me for the most part in cash, which was nice. And I just basically made feature sheets, took photos, and sat open houses. And the one thing I would say
Plus,
I would
there's always a lot of like baked goods at the
yeah.
open houses. Am I right?
Yeah. So I get to eat for free plus
Yeah.
do my homework, which worked out really, really well. And I think what I did learn is just like fabrics of cities, right? Because I would drive from the deep north to the deep south. Like I touched every part of the city of Calgary. And my parents moved a lot anyways. And so it was really cool just to kind of see people interact and touch and feel and understand what their considerations. And that was my
Sure.
first experience of like, okay, well, how does this market really work? And then I met my wife, and like I said, I asked my brother about building within established neighborhoods, and he was open to that idea. So we started building duplexes. Um, back, I don't know what year it was, but it was a while ago. So I started my career, like I said, 15 years ago. I built my first duplex. It was tearing down an older wartime bungalow, building up a duplex, your typical infill style. I think we built that house like over 10 years ago for 600,000 aside is what we were selling them for. And they weren't selling like hotcakes. So this is, I think, '07, '08. So it wasn't like they weren't
Yeah.
selling fast. Um, and I met my wife and we started to do more architectural inspired infill. She taught me a lot about how to apply your passion of arts to the actual field of what you were doing. And so we started doing that. And I think we transformed the way infill was being built. Like there was a very model way to do it, and we started to do it in a different way. And so we were winning awards and getting recognition across North America for architecture. But then, come 2014, I think it was, we started to see like ourselves serving like $1.5 million a side for these duplexes, $1.3 million a side. And
Wow. Okay.
I think we built a $3 million home in like an estate area and had a triple car garage. And I was just like, kind of one of those like watershed pause moments again with like, why did we say we wanted to do this? Like, well, we wanted to like live in the inner city. We love living here. We wanted to have our friends and family live here, but now we're providing housing that the vast majority of Calgarians can't afford. And so kind of paused again. And this was 7 years ago, 2016-ish. We went to city council and we said, hey, this is a duplex lot. We'd like to put 4 units on it. And they were like, no. So administration, outright refusal. Went to Calgary Planning Commission, outright refusal. But I still, like, all my consultants were like, what are you doing? Like, you don't go this far with a refusal. And I was like, well, at this point, I've already spent the money on you. Why wouldn't I just keep going? Like, what would be the point of stopping?
Yeah.
And so we went to council, and it was when Mayor Nenshi was there, and they debated for like 6.5, 7 hours.
Wow.
And it was to get 2 additional units, and then we lost because it was a relatively new council. One of the council members turned his vote, and we lost 8-7. And it was kind of like confusing the whole time because I was like, how are we still here, like debating this thing? And then it was like this huge transformation moment for us, and I think for the city to say, we have a problem when we talk about balanced growth if we can't figure out how to increase like 2 units within the established neighborhoods. And so
that's right.
We spent the next like 6 months working with the city of Calgary. There was a bunch of industry members about like, okay, well, what is this density form we're talking about? Why can't we seem to find more of it? What is the challenges? And then they introduced a new zoning policy. And I think because we were so ingrained in helping and being on the front end of it, we just kind of saw the writing on the wall that this was going to happen. And so, over the course of my career in the last 7 years, we've built over 150 to 200 of these missing middle units.
Really? Wow. That was going to be a question I was going to ask you later. Wow.
And what's interesting about that for us is like, I never thought it was a scalable, sustainable model. Like we just kept doing it because it's kind of where we cut our teeth. But like, we've now done a medical center, a rooftop garden project, which was 20 units. We've done a 63 unit project, which has 16,000 square foot of commercial and internal courtyard. And we're just completing our largest project in Winnipeg, which is a 206 residential units and has a heritage restoration and retrofit. And so we've kind of started to touch every aspect of the real estate industry. I would say industrial and new growth are the 2 that we haven't done. Everything within the established neighborhoods and redevelopment we've now worked on. And one of the things that started to become, again, I think this kind of more evident to us over the last few years was lots of people are building the 1 bedroom, the 2 bedroom, the studio, 4 to kind of 12-story apartment building. And there's lots of folks that do it really, really efficiently and really, really well. Where they run into issues is kind of, with municipalities, with financing, with advocacy, with urban integration and how communities are involved. And so we just kind of decided that we're going to work on a few of those projects every year. But the thing that we see the most opportunity in is in middle housing. And I know Jennifer and I were talking about this yesterday, Keysmet, who I know you're friends with.
Oh, yeah.
How you folks define middle is a little differently than us. And I think how we define middle is we look at it more of a gentle density, something that can sit right next to a single family home and feel contextually sensitive. Typically doesn't have an elevator core and is more of a walk-up style apartment. That's kind of how we've identified that. And so we now have another 160 units in the pipeline of middle density. And I think, again, for myself, we're at this moment now where it's like, I'm pretty sure we're probably one of the largest kind of gentle density developers within Canada. And we don't know, well, I could tell you myself, like, I know that we're not helping the housing crisis by building middle housing in Calgary alone. And so these conversations and helping other municipalities and help help them understand the financial constraints and what small developers go through when they try to build these small projects, or why there isn't enough of them, and how we can work together to unlock more of this housing form is kind of what we've been working on. So having lots of conversations with CMHC and other administrative teams about how do we now take what we've learned here as like, a foundational tool, which the city of Calgary has been really excellent at being very progressive, and bringing that to other municipalities. And I think, one of the things I'm realizing the gap for so long was that planners and policymakers oftentimes don't understand the financial metrics, or not privy to what the financial constraints are. Sure. And they generally say, like, we don't want to get into the numbers, or the numbers are not important, or, they just try to stay unbiased and unskewed about what things cost. But to be honest, I think it's probably one of the biggest missing gaps is we need to understand the product we're putting into the marketplace, and we need to understand the financial metrics of the model, especially when we talk about affordable housing, and what are some of the tools and levers we can pull on delivering that. So long-winded, but that's
no, this is great.
Now. Yeah,
I have no more questions now to ask, so thanks a lot. That's great. No, I've got lots. So I did not know that you were going across Canada, so that's very interesting. Out of the 120 to 150 sort of this missing middle, infill type of units, what would you say is from Calgary, from where you were, compared to how is it 100 versus 20? Like how's that shift going across out of your city across Canada?
Yeah, so I think for what we've recognized is like the goal isn't for us to build the units. The goal is for us to empower people within those communities to build those units and show them how to do that. And you have to realize, like, every project that we do is usually maximizing out at 8 units. And that's what we've kind of saw as a sweet spot for a middle kind of, let's call it, typical grid layout, established older bungalow home. We're putting on a 6,000 square foot lot, 50 by 120, often lane loaded. And I know in a lot of places they're not lane loaded. So we have models that work without lanes. We're putting on 8 units. So again, when we talk about scale, we have 20 sites right now where we're doing 8 units. So that's how we get to 160. And so,
so let me jump in on that. So if you have 20 sites where you're putting on 8 units, or we could call it an 8-plex if you wanted to call it that. Is every single one of those basically used to be a single home on it, and it's becoming 8? Really?
Correct. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Calgary now has a 0.5 parking minimum. So all of our what we're building is kind of intergenerational housing, which I think is really key. And I think community members or residents don't understand this. And I think it's one of the things we're going to try to help elevate and actually democratize information and make it more accessible, so people can actually like see what we're doing and touch and feel and understand what's happening. But our missing middle, if I was to tell you the one objective we have, is like, how do we make sure that the residents who live within those communities have places that they can live in, and not like by themselves, segregated in seniors living facilities, but amongst us. Because I think our boomers are living longer. They're more capable. They're more agile. They're living longer. Like they're doing things longer than we would have ever anticipated, and we need to account for that. But more importantly, like, why there's so much fear and vitriol is I don't think these folks they don't want change as much as they're just they don't understand what the change looks like, and they're not participating in that change design. And so for us, it's like all of our structures that we're building are gearing towards is we're building 4 at-grade, fully accessible, enclosed 1-bedroom suites. And then the goal is to have family-oriented housing on top. And so, think about like a Lego. You have four sets of houses across, and then 4 up top. And the 4 up top are typically 3-bedroom, family oriented. Those are typically corners. In a mid-block environment, it's going to be kind of 4 in the front and then 4 in the back. And that's kind of what our model has become now.
Now, so let's talk about parking, because I'm glad you brought that up. The one thing that, I will, retweet or share what you talk about or others. And, the first, comments that come in are always like, but what about parking? But what about parking? And, I've always been, pretty blunt to say, I don't think a prerequisite for someone having to own a home is that they have to own a car.
Yeah.
And then I get, I can't believe you're, it goes on. But what say you on parking? And are you finding it to be, as the sky is kind of falling kind of narrative that some people immediately yell about when the less parking discussion comes up?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone is parking is an easy one to hold on to kind of disguise what your other concerns are, right? And so
Yeah.
it's parking, I feel like, is masked oftentimes in other concerns. And what I would say to municipalities is like, and what I would say to community members and stakeholders who live within these communities is like, rather than fighting the housing that we need desperately for people, let's actually solve the true constraint. And if it is parking, then let's get our municipalities to invest capital back into parking based on the amount of increases in change that's happening in your neighborhood. But it's hard to even have those. We're not even having those conversations because we're not united as a group to say, okay, we're now changing these communities. We're increasing the tax base. Like, everyone knows that the business case for redevelopment is much stronger than for new growth because it's immediately tax positive, right? It's not a tax neutral environment. And so why that money isn't being redirected into the things that impact those communities, I don't really have the answer to that. And so, this is one of the things that we talk about all the time in the city of Calgary is like our new growth developers, and most folks think that I hate new growth. I don't. I actually see a place for it. I think it will continue, and it's kind of absurd for us to believe that it's not going to happen.
Of course.
I know that conversation happens there. It's like, we need smarter new growth. They do a great job at now even being more dense than we are. They have more diversity in housing options than we have within the established neighborhoods. And they do a great job at advocating for what they need to unlock that housing typology. And so, folks are like, oh, it'll always be easier to build new growth. It will be if we don't culturally shift how we invest our capital and how we think about how people should live. And so, my whole thing about, and I say this in that the city and people kind of get allergic to it, but it's tough to look at alternative modes of transportation when you continue to prioritize making it more convenient to have a car. The moment that it's less convenient to have a car, or there's no parking on the street, or you have to look at alternative modes, that's when people will start to do it more and more and more. And so you almost need a bit of friction and rub. Like, we almost need these communities to be permit parking only, and so we're more than happy to sign that. Like, our 4 units that don't have parking, we don't even want them to have access to permit parking on the street because it would define what we're building. And so it's like, we're 100% okay to say the 4 units on the stall are unparked or belong to, the people that park in the family oriented homes, and the rest of our units don't need to have stalls allocated.
And so, so those tenants, they know in advance there's no parking.
100%. And they also know that the rate that they're paying is reflective of that, right? Like, they know our cost is related to the fact that we have no parking. And we're going through this exercise right now with the city. We have another larger mixed use project, and it's like, yes, we could add 100 stalls of underground parking, but that cost is $70,000 per door. Now, amortize that cost over the course of, a 10-year program or whatever it is. Like, you can see what we have to charge additionally per month to support that parking cost. And when people talk about sustainability, and they always do within established neighborhoods because they're worried about their tree canopies and, how do we not overcrowd and whatever the concerns are, it's like, those are all pretty valid. We need to solve for that, but we have to stop putting this concrete in the ground to house our vehicles, because it is the least sustainable. There's no adaptive reuse. We're going to have millions of these parking stalls underground that can only be used to service cars. And so the more that we account for them culturally, the more entrenched we are and the more difficult it is to kind of pivot away from that.
Interesting. I appreciate that insights. I tend to lean your way as well. In the context of where I am, we have no on-street permitting type of program for parking, although it may be something that can be reviewed or will be reviewed at another time. But So that is an interesting thing. In fact, I know a lot of people across the country I've spoken with. They look to like Calgary as an example where they have on-street permitting and stuff like that. So that's interesting.
Yeah, the one thing too to
Yep,
keep in mind is like when we have local BIAs, business improvement
yep,
districts,
yep,
they actually get a portion of the parking revenue. So if Calgary Parking Authority is managing the parking on behalf of that community within that community, and they have paid parking places, the
yep.
revenue goes back to the BIA, a
Oh,
part of that
interesting.
revenue. So that
Okay,
actually goes directly back to the community to
that
reinvest in whatever
that's right.
programming they want.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you. That's a good tip. Well, just to give you another little context here, we went through a 3-year engagement and consultation process to redo all of our zoning within the city. In fact, our old zoning was from 1995, and we needed to update it, obviously. And so we did really great work. I think our staff and our community really did rally around the changes that were necessary. We got rid of exclusionary zoning. We immediately made it, as of right for triplexes. I made a motion at council for them to look at things above a triplex, and so that passed, and staff are now looking at that. I've always looked at, similar to what you're doing and others. If something can accommodate more than three, then why are we stopping? Why are we cutting it off there? So
Yeah.
so hopefully that comes back, from our staff soon enough, where there could be obviously some parameters around how it would work and fit, but I really want to be able to try to see if we can do more than three. And I want to get back to where you were saying at the very, very, very beginning, you want to do sort of what is right. I think that's what I heard you say when you come to building. So if we specifically focus on the infill, and we're taking that, that single detached home, and then we're putting 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in some cases, where would you define what is right within that scenario? Um, is there an easy sort of equation about what is right? Is it always going to be 8 where it used to be one house? Or is it,
Yeah.
talk to me where you think there's an important sort of definition of what is right when it comes to
Yeah.
infill.
So it's a fascinating conversation, and this is the whole problem with policy and zoning and realignment and refinement is like you only can get it right in that moment of time, because the thing that's really interesting about us, and I would say everyone is seeing it, is like the innovation and adaptability of our species has been incredible over the last 10, 15, 20 years. Like think about how much technology has changed.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
we have this pandemic, and it absolutely crushes our downtown cores, changes the way people live, work, play, and has lasting implications on
Oh, sure.
how
Yeah.
we live and move forward. And so I was looking at a school program yesterday that was like you only go in once a week, and I know that stuff was around, but now it's becoming more commonplace. And so it's very hard. A lot of people are like, you need a vehicle because you can't get your groceries. Well, now your groceries can come right to your door. You don't
Yeah,
technically need a vehicle. My wife loves to order the groceries to the door, even though we get
sure.
some awful produce at the time. She still loves the convenience of it. And so
Yeah,
it's like, and it's only going to get better. It's not going to get worse from that perspective. Technology is making it easier and easier for us to live, and making it more, people are attacking convenience at rapid paces. And so when it comes to like policies, I think what happens is we get so rigid in trying to suffice communities, and I would say the loudest members of our communities oftentimes, without thinking about the most vulnerable in our communities.
yeah,
And so it's very challenging to have a discussion about housing affordability, housing crisis, housing wait lists when we struggle, when we're putting unit caps on properties that we know could suffice more folks. And so it then comes down to this question of like, should we be housing more cars or should we be housing more people? And everyone is afraid of the implications of more density. Like we know factually that density does not create more crime or more pollution, or a lot of the things that people are saying, like there's it does more good from that perspective than it does bad. And so the only thing people continue to fear is like the idea that our communities are going to become traffic congested. And to be honest, if that's the thing that municipalities need to solve for, it's a lot better than trying to solve for homelessness or people who don't have access to housing. And so for me, the right answer is like, let's go back to who we are, and let's go back to like, human nature and the humility of like looking after each other. And so
Yeah.
if our grandparents, our kids, our grandkids can't live within these cities and communities we're building, then I feel like we're failing them, and we're failing ourselves. And so, the idea of unit counts is one that I, every time I see it, I'm like, I just don't know why we're entrenched in 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I don't think there has to be a number. All I'm saying is like, we should define what is appropriate for someone to live in. That homeowner could define it, that their developer partner could define it. If I can fit 8 one-bedroom families on a house that was the same footprint, and this is happening all over the United States. Co-living is a big thing right now for young people. And so I just really struggle when we start to talk about how many families are appropriate to live. I think cities need to do a better job at saying, we don't worry, we have you covered for all the infrastructure that you're worried about: safety, waste, parking, like, cycling infrastructure, like that. That's really, municipalities don't get to spend enough time on those things because they're so inundated trying to balance this conversation and this voice between the people and housing. And I think like, we're not going back to the core fundamentals that housing is about people, and we need to find ways to house those people. And the pressure is growing every single day, and we can't do it fast enough is kind of where my head is.
That was a fantastic answer. I told you at the beginning that I was inspired just reading everything that you're doing, but I'm going to be stealing a lot of what you just said there. I hope other people do too when they hear that. So I appreciate that. Let's talk finally about and hey, if you don't want to answer this, that's fine, but I just want to talk to you about affordability. And so oftentimes we get an application in, any city will get an application in, and it's X amount of units. It doesn't matter, 8 or 20 or 100. And one of the first things that kind of comes out is, but is it affordable? And so I just want to get your thoughts on your projects, others, if you want to observe others, where, it's of course we need to have true, affordable, deeply discounted, sort of like social services run housing, of course. But the housing continuum includes the missing middle, those that are needing to try to move up or down within the whole continuum. And the argument of, but that's not affordable, or is there affordable? I'm sure you hear this often. What's your take on that?
Yes. So maybe before I even jump in, because I didn't really clarify this, when we talk about middle housing, we're talking specifically about a form, not what people earn or where they sit in their socioeconomic status.
Yes.
So middle housing is very specific about, it's not a single family home, and it's not typically from our perspective, a 4-story apartment. It's everything in between. So I think that clarification is really important. When we talk about housing affordability, it's a continuum. And I think what people don't, what they're struggling to understand, and I don't think CMHC is struggling to understand this, because they are inundated with applications, and they've made a pure policy decision just on their behavior. I don't know what they're saying there up there, but from the outside view as the private sector developer, we are seeing that they are now investing heavily in rental housing. So I think what they've said is housing access is a problem today. It's just the ability to get access to housing.
Yes.
The cost of that housing right now is not even necessarily what they're probably super focused on. I think they're trying to solve 100 problems. But on the private sector, what they're saying is, if you could just create housing that is accessible, and rental is by far more accessible, go and do that. And what is the program that we need to help you do that? And I think that's the MLI program that you're seeing the vast majority of people across the country using that tool just to try to build housing today. And now that tool is becoming inundated with applications because costs have gone through the roof, interest rates have gone through the roof. And we're not seeing a lot of things coming down. Everything is just continuing to move up, including land bases. And so to solve the housing problem is not a single solution. There's no one person that could say, I have the solution, I'm going to do this and it'll help. Like, no one has a tool like that. Not even the government has a tool that could help, because it is so complex and diverse, and it requires participation from so many of us. And so what's happening oftentimes I see is the private sector is terrified of government and regulation. And when there's talks about real affordability, they're just saying, let us build, make it easier for us for build, reduce the red tape. And then the public sector is exactly saying what you're saying. It's like, okay, we could do that. But how are we helping the housing continuum? And so I think the private sector is currently playing a huge role in, call it, market housing. They're having a hard time playing a role in non-market housing because municipalities don't know how to really engage and interface with private developers. There's not enough program or experiences that are creating this kind of collaboration and synergy. And it's kind of what I've told our organization is, like, we need to come up the middle and help be the advocate mediator and tell municipalities, like, I'm not here for your land or your money. I'm here to help you assess what your needs are and then find the right people to help you meet those housing needs and help show you the performance and understand what the requirements are in order for you to meet your housing needs. So how do we unpack your goals and your needs and then figure out how to engage the industry to do so? So, along the continuum, we're not seeing any non-market housing unless it's typically delivered through the public sector or not-for-profits. And they're inundated. The request for housing from them is huge, and they're suffering from the same issues that the private sector are suffering from, right? Like, costs are through the roof.
Labor shortages, materials.
And then talent pool. Like, if I just graduated and I need to live in your city, can a non-for-profit pay me the same that a private organization can, and that are both building housing? Like, it's going to be so hard for them to compete with that talent pool. They're getting older talent pool that have been in the market, that have experience now, that have time, can go back and give back. But this is one of the things I tell everyone is, like, Mayor Guthrie, you have a goal and you say we're short 4,000 affordable housing units and we need to deliver that over the next 20 years. If I came to you and I said, I will deliver those 4,000 housing affordable units at the way that you define them, but I'm also going to be very profitable in doing so, is that a conflict of interest?
For me? No.
No. And I don't think so either. And I think that this is a huge conundrum that many people face, is like, social enterprise or companies that make money will be more successful in being sustainable in delivering housing than those that don't. Because as we continue to look at our non-for-profits, they struggle with meeting their balance sheets, with getting grants, with getting equity. They're having trouble building sustainable models. And so what a lot of them are now looking at is mixed market housing. How do we use market rates?
They are. I know that.
To help. And so what I'm saying is, mixed market housing as a strategy actually works across both the private and public sectors. We just have to find the tools to incentivize it. And so we as an organization are super passionate about delivering true affordability. 30% of their median income is, like, really what we're defining it as. Anything below that, I think, is more socially orientated and requires additional services. And so it's the deeper spectrum and still needs to be solved. But we're trying really hard to find ways to work with both the federal government, with the municipalities, with the provincial governments, to say, we want all of our projects to have that affordable component within our buildings, and undefinable or unrecognizable, is what we're looking for. It's like, I want people who live in our buildings to be at the affordability spectrum and no one to even know.
And no one knows. They're still taking the same stairs to their units, and they're parking their car, or they're putting their bike in the bike rack, and they're talking out on the porch. No one know. It doesn't matter. That integration. And you are so right. I've actually heard a lot of nonprofits saying to me, it's only been in the last year, by the way. We used to only build our, X amount of units, and it's just for the social, and it's just us. And now they're completely shifting to in fact, they're saying, do you know of any builders in town that might want to partner with us? They're trying. You are exactly right.
I think culturally, for some reason, we thought putting people together who suffer from the same kind of, like, challenges was a good idea. And I don't know if it was like, I don't know, like just like how my family grew up, that was never the case. Like
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
parents leaving, like, and so social housing, like, you know, we lived in neighborhoods that had a vast majority of it. And it was always weird to me to take a bunch of people who struggle from the same problems and put them all in the same place.
Sure. Sure.
And so
Yeah.
I think there's a huge opportunity for us as we look at mixed market and bringing people back into these communities to help them along their journey and further their needs. And so I think that movement is coming, and cities just need to look at tools. Like we were having a conversation yesterday about, well, what about mini TIFs? Like what about municipal tax reliefs on buildings that have affordability on it? What would it require if you have an existing, let's say I took 3 single family homes and I was able to put, I don't know, 50 units on there.
Yep.
Well, you're now net positive tax revenue on 47 of those units. If I say, Mayor Guthrie, can you give me a tax hold on those or charge me a reduced tax rate on the 47? And of those 47 units, 20 of them will be affordable. But for me to get those 20 or 10 deep affordability, I need tax relief for the next 10 years that I keep those affordable units. And then let's reassess in 10 years whether or not we both want to renew those affordable units for that tax relief. Like that's a way for you to increase your affordable unit count immediately without any loss or investment in capital dollars.
Yeah, because the increase of going from 3 homes to 47 is already a gain anyways. Yeah. No, these are the types of conversations everyone has to have. All right, totally. I'm gonna end on one question for you. I mean, everything's been on the spot. Not we rehearsed any of this anyways. Okay. What would be the one advice that you would give policymakers, and so that can include both city staff and politicians? And what's the one advice you'd maybe give to the community at large about trying to get our heads around helping to address the housing crisis?
I'll start with the community piece first, because I think like this conversation is happening, but the connection is getting lost. Families are concerned about where their children are going to live and where their grandchildren are going to live. And then also where they are going to live. Like, where are my elderly parents going to live when they're in their homes? Or if they start to get ill, like, how do we look after them? And so those are real conversations. We need to amplify those conversations, and then we need to start defining what solutions may look like with those community members, because it's kind of like I said, it's in that time of crisis or rub that you start to realize like, oh, I wish I would have done this. And so we almost need to agitate that problem. We need to amplify that, because in 10 years, it's just going to be the most prevalent, because our boomers are going to be at an age where they're going to need those things. And we didn't actually work on building the right infrastructure. And so how do we make sure that people understand that these are everyday problems that you and I and everyone else faces? 1 in 5 Calgarians require affordable housing assistance. So when you're looking around, 1 in every 5 people require that. And you can isolate yourself by keeping yourself within your community amongst your folks, but that problem is just going to continue to show up on your door. And so, and you're the person who's serving you your coffee, or who's cleaning your car, or who's serving you groceries, like, these are our people that are suffering from this, and we need to be there to support them. And so this is our global problem, community problem that we need to solve. This is not like, hey, you could go develop over in that community, but leave my community alone. It's like, no, this needs to be looked at more holistically at a macro level. And it comes down to what I said about, we have to start caring for our people. And it's something that is really important for me. And people are like, oh, well, maybe we should shut down immigration, whatever those things are saying. It's like, you can say whatever you want about those things, but aside from that, we're still going to have the crisis that we're facing today. And we don't have enough people to work the current jobs that we have. And so like, immigration has been a key contributor for us forever. And so I think we need to acknowledge those things as a community and understand that this is our problem, this is our fight, and we need to work together to solve it. I think for policymakers and politicians, it's like, we have to stop.
Don't hold back.
I think it's more
I could take it. So.
Yeah. Well, what I would say is like, they are there. Like I would say they're closer to understanding I've seen so much progress on this front. It's been incredible over the last 10 years. And so the things that I've said is like, we need leaders. You chose to take on this position, and we've, as citizens, have bestowed this upon you, not for you to not make decisions or evade decisions. Make a decision, whether bad or good. Make a decision is my thing. Is like, we need you to be a leader, and you may not always get it right, but bad decisions are better than no decisions. So stop delaying and continuing to say we need to go back and do this. No, just make decisions, and then let's move on to the next topic. And so for politicians, it's like, we need leaders. We need you to make decisions, and that's going to become incredibly important for us. I think for administration is like, developers are not, they may have historically been money hungry or bad people or whatever, but we can't paint them with those brushes regardless of the experiences that we've had. We need to see them as collaborators, and inversely for us as the industry, we need to see administration as city builders as well. Like, these are public servants. They are here to make our city better. How do we do it collectively and bring the skills and sets and values we have together to get the best outcomes? And so I would say for both the administration staff and for the industry is like, stop talking badly about each other. When you're frustrated about time and process and red tape and permitting times, it's like, okay, cool. Like, we understand it's not hard for us to define problems. It's harder for us to talk about solutions. And so how do we get solutions oriented and work together is what I would say from the admin side.
Oh, that's great. I appreciate both those pieces of advice. I think that's just, I would echo that and say fantastic. Thank you so much. So thank you. This has been so great. And I think, selfishly, it's great for me because I'm, soaking up everything that you've said. But, when I post this and people are going to be listening to it, watching it, hopefully it spurs on other people, whether it's policymakers, politicians, or developers or community. We need to just understand that this housing crisis is extremely real, and we must pull together to try to figure this out. And you're right, it will take everybody and everything, but we also shouldn't use that as sort of a crutch. Well, it's going to take everybody, but not me.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to spur on everybody to say, no, you have a role, and maybe it's just advocacy. Maybe it's just that one letter that you send in to, a council that says, I want that development in my community. And that's it. That's your role. That's your role.
It's showing up. I think I wrote a tweet about this the other day. Like, my daughter goes to a school. They have a development project that's next door. It's clear the school doesn't support the development project. And I was kind of like, I didn't want to get in the weeds of the conversation, and I was kind of nervous about it. And, I'm an industry member. I don't know if I should influence this. And I didn't really say much. And I saw the emails go out, and I was like, I'm not going to say anything. But then it showed up in her classroom where, like, the kids at school and the teachers were like, oh, everyone should come and speak against this development. My daughter put up her hand and said, what happens if we like it? Like, are we allowed? And they're like, no, we just want people speaking against it. And I was really bothered by that, because it's like, man, those are our children now that are being told to not be open-minded. And they just went to Ottawa and were taught about democracy and trying to understand both sides of the story. And they did a bunch of Indigenous relationship conversations and reconciliation. It's like, these lands are not ours. They never belong to us. We must steward them in the best way. And we continue to forget that every day that we move on. It's like, this is my house. Well, no, that the land that your house belongs on was taken from somebody, and taken in a way that, for many was not right nor fair. And so we must honor that. And when we talk about, well, what can we do that's better? For myself, it's like, the only thing I know how to do right now is to make things more inclusive and accessible. And so what I would say is, like, I wrote an email after. I said, hey, I'm sorry I didn't speak up earlier. I just felt like I was conflicted. But the way that, I'm not sure if the development is right or wrong. I don't have the details. But what I do think is important is that we're able to actually meet these folks and have a real civilized conversation about the net benefits and the net concerns. And until we do that, we're just perpetuating fear. And so what I would say is, like, there's not enough people that stand up just to say, hold on a second. And it's difficult in those environments. It's you have to be, it takes real leadership and guts to stand up and say, I'm not sure if what you're saying is right. And so what I would say is, like, for those people is, like, like you said, the role may feel small, but it's so large. And that's how real change starts, is when the people come together and understand that they actually influence these outcomes.
Yeah. Totally agree. And maybe one day I'll have to tell you a story about we haven't had an actual development application come right beside a school here, and it's still under appeal now. I think 6 years later, and it was interesting that there was a lot of students at the school that piped up saying shadows and parking, and they have every right to say that. It's absolutely. But it was an interesting conversation about that. Again, maybe something very similar. I don't know what's happening, what you're describing. But all right. Well, look, thank you very much. Oh, how can people find you? Tell everybody.
Thank you again for having me. I'm trying to be most active on Twitter, but you can hit me up. Alkarimdelvani.com is my website if you wanted to connect. And Twitter is where I'm, like, most active in seeing things. So hit me up, and if I can help you or folks in any other way, I'm happy to do so and have these conversations.
And your Twitter handle is what?
I think it's like Delvani Alkarim, but if you type in my name, you'll find me. It's Alkarim Delvani, and I'm sure you'll find your way. So
and I'll link it to here as well. I will continue to see you online. Thank you for this connection, and I'm really hopeful that this conversation inspires more people than just myself. And thank you again, and wishing you all the best in everything that you do.
You as well. I'm excited about all the work you guys are doing, and I'm excited to see it come along. And like I said, if there's ever an opportunity to help, or if I'm ever down there, I'd love to come visit and see some of the change.
Absolutely, that'd be amazing. All right, I'm gonna hit the leave button. Have a good one.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.